My ex-wife lied that our son faced a serious problem to urgently summon me, but she'd really run off with her boyfriend, and what I did next left her stunned. I was married to my ex-wife for 5 years, but we have been divorced for around 1 year now. My ex-wife is 33, female, and I'm 35, male. We also have shared custody of our 6-year-old son. My ex-wife and I met at work 8 years ago and fell for each other there. We started dating, and the relationship continued even after I quit my job there and started working someplace else. After 2 years of dating, we decided to get married, and a little after our wedding, we found out we were pregnant. We were happy together with our little family consisting of me, my ex-wife, and my son, but that didn't last long. A couple of years into our marriage, the pressure of work and raising our son started taking its toll on our relationship. Unlike most couples, we were not able to overcome it. The last 2 years of our marriage were pretty much just us ignoring each other as much as we could because we couldn't even hold a conversation if our lives depended on it. It would either be pointless small talk, or it would end in a fight, so we just stopped talking. That should have been my signal to leave, but for some reason, I was still holding out hope that things would someday go back to normal. They didn't. Things actually got worse because, right before we filed for divorce with mutual consent, we had a huge fight, which is what kind of made us both realize that this was over. I don't remember how the fight started anymore. It was probably something about me forgetting to do the dishes from the night before because I'd had to work late. That petty argument blew up into something 10 times bigger, and we said the most horrible things to each other in our anger, which all happened to be what we were really feeling anyway. That fight was what effectively ended our marriage, and we filed for divorce with mutual consent. Our son was thankfully not at home that day. He was with my parents because they wanted to take him out for a day. It took him a while to get used to the custody arrangements, but I guess he's a smart kid and understands that his parents don't get along at all and need to be separate to do a half-decent job of raising him and living their own lives. We tried to stay together in spite of our marital problems for his sake, but honestly, it's better this way. At least he doesn't have to watch his parents fight like animals every single day, try to rip each other's heads off, or just pretend the other doesn't exist. This is a better choice. My ex-wife and I started living separately right after our last fight and had worked out our own custody arrangement before anything had been finalized by the court. We have continued to co-parent our son since. It was going smoothly until a couple of weeks ago when my ex-wife and I got into another argument, and this time it was about our son. She had taken him to the bookstore and bought him a bunch of toys and a book that was clearly not age appropriate. She claimed that the book was supposed to be hers and that she'd accidentally let it go with him. But now my son was asking me what a bunch of words meant, which I obviously couldn't explain to him because he wasn't supposed to know these words in the first place. He'd gone through the first page of the book, which had a bunch of cuss words, and while he hadn't picked up the other words, he sure had a knack for picking the ones he wasn't supposed to say out loud. These were all cuss words, and my son was saying them all day now, thanks to his mother's carelessness. I told her that she'd been careless and that she needed to be more mindful when she had our son with her. That turned into a fight because she thinks I have no right to try and teach her how to raise our son, even though I'm his parent too. As far as I know, I have every right to do this. We got into a massive argument over that, and things were blown out of proportion, so we stopped talking once more unless it was absolutely necessary. Ever since we separated, we've only discussed our son anyway, and now that we were in a fight once more, we weren't talking at all unless we had to discuss things like the timings of our son's drop-offs and pickups at our respective homes or if there were any health concerns regarding him. That's how it's been for the past couple of weeks, tense and formal, but I've been okay with it. We got divorced for a reason, and the reason was that we simply couldn't get along anymore. So if I was okay with it back then, I was more than okay with it now. It seemed to me, though, that she might have been taking this harder than I was because she'd blocked me on social media, something I hadn't done. She'd also become more and more aggressive whenever she dropped our son off at my place, and the way she'd act was nothing short of nasty. She wouldn't even look at me, but she'd make sure that she was as aggressive as possible while shoving all my son's belongings toward me whenever she'd bring him over. It was annoying, but I didn't say anything because it wasn't affecting me the way she thought it was going to. I just didn't care what she thought of me anymore. We were done. I'm sure she was getting even angrier that I wasn't giving her a reaction like she wanted, which is probably what led to what happened 3 days back. So, I had a work party to go to, and my ex-wife had agreed to look after our son for the evening. I was surprised that she'd agreed because it was the second half of the week, and it was my turn to have him. I thought she'd relish the opportunity to keep me on my toes and create some trouble for me, but she agreed without any fuss. I dropped our son off at her house, and she took him inside without any of her usual aggression, which she reserved specifically for me. I was pleasantly surprised because I thought she was finally choosing to act like a grown-up instead of throwing childish tantrums. After dropping my son off at her place, I started driving toward the venue, but 20 minutes later, I received a message from my ex-wife saying that I needed to come to her place as soon as possible because she had something to tell me about our son. I was already running late, so I decided to ask her if it was really that important. She said it was just one little thing but insisted we absolutely had to talk about it in person, and it had to be now. I had no idea what she was going on about, but if it was about our son, I didn't want to leave anything up to chance. I decided to drive back to her place and skip the party. It took me another 20 minutes or so to go back, and when I reached her house, I found her gone along with our son. All the lights inside her house were turned off, and her car wasn't parked in the garage either. All that she'd left for me to find was a note stuck to the door, which said, "Taking our son's name, to meet my new boyfriend or stay mad." I saw red at that point and decided to call her up because there was no way she was this petty and mean. I called her a few times, but she didn't answer. When I tried to text her, she was still unresponsive. I was standing outside her door in a tux, looking as stupid as I felt. I knew I couldn't just let her get away with this, so I decided to do something just as crazy as what she'd done. I decided to ask her mother where she was because I knew for a fact that she always kept her mother updated about her location. I told my ex-mother-in-law that I wanted to surprise her and my son with something really special and that I needed to know where she was without her knowing I was looking for her. Her mother was naive enough to believe me and sent me her location, which happened to be at a nearby restaurant. We'd been to that restaurant a couple of times, so I made my way there within a few minutes. Once I reached, I spotted my son and his mother sitting at a table near the window with another guy. I felt a surge of anger and annoyance once more. My ex-wife and son had their backs to me, so they didn't see me coming, but the other guy did. He looked really confused as I made my way to their table and pulled out a chair to sit next to him. When my ex-wife realized what was going on, she looked shocked that I'd found her and started fumbling with her words, but I wasn't there for her. I was there for her new boyfriend. I looked him straight in the eye and started telling him all about what my ex-wife had been up to, revealing just how psychotic she was. I told him about the dirty book she'd accidentally sent home with our son, her weird aggression toward me, and, of course, what she'd done that day. She'd literally made me skip a work event so she could be petty and create trouble for me by using our son. He looked shocked, and my ex-wife kept trying to speak over me, but I just kept going on and on because all the terrible things just kept coming up like vomit. I was really angry about what she'd done that day, so I didn't stop talking until her boyfriend said that he needed to leave. He practically ran out of there, and by the time that happened, my ex-wife was in tears. My son just looked really confused, and that's kind of the only thing I regret because I didn't want him to feel that way. After her boyfriend ran out on her, we stayed at the table for a couple more minutes while my ex-wife blubbered on about how I'd ruined her relationship. Apparently, her boyfriend wasn't aware that she was still co-parenting with me and that I was an active part of her life because she told him that her son's father had passed away. She claimed that when her son wasn't with her, he was with her parents, so he had no idea about me, and now that he'd found out, it seemed unlikely that he'd want to come back to her. For 3 months, she'd been lying to him. I didn't feel bad for her at all because she chose to lie, and that wasn't my fault. Then she chose to play games with me out of pettiness, and this was just the consequence of what she'd done to herself. She could cry all she wanted, but I wasn't going to feel bad for her at all. I think she must have been waiting for me to apologize to her or something, but I just sat there silently and watched her cry. After a couple of minutes of crying, she decided to lunge at me to attack me physically. Luckily, a waiter was there to stop her. My son was pretty traumatized, and we got thrown out and blacklisted from the restaurant. The cops were called, and I decided to press charges because she did attack me. I didn't have any sympathy for her at that point. She was let off with a warning after being taken to the station, but that just made sure that I'd be filing for full custody of our son. I even told her about it before blocking her. It's been 3 days since I blocked her number and social media. I've also spoken to my lawyer, and I'm filing for full custody of our son soon. I'm not sorry about what happened because, despite everything, I'd always believed that she was at least a decent mother and could have partial custody of our son. But after the incident at the restaurant, I no longer have that opinion. However, her mother called me up yesterday to scream at me, and that kind of made me rethink my move. She told me that my ex-wife was very disappointed that I'd chosen to push her to the edge and was now flipping it on her, using her outburst against her to get custody of our son. Apparently, I'd been horrible to her for ages, and now I'd ruined 2 of her most important relationships, her boyfriend and her son. I told my ex-mother-in-law that this was not all my fault. If anything, she should blame her daughter for being petty and pushing me to do something equally petty because I'm not the kind of person who usually takes things so far. We had a bit of an argument, and my ex-mother-in-law told me that this was a really cruel thing to do to the mother of my child and that she'd lost a lot of respect for me. That really hit hard because, at the end of the day, no matter what she'd done, she still was the mother of my child. Apart from that one incident, she'd always been a good mom. Even in that instance, I'm not sure if I have the right to say she'd been a bad mother because she'd attacked me out of anger. After she'd come back to her senses, she immediately checked up on how our son was doing while the restaurant manager called the police. She barely even cared about me or herself in that moment, so I can't say she's been a bad mother. A slightly irresponsible one, sure, but not entirely bad or evil. At the same time, I don't know if it's safe for our son to be left alone with his mother now because she has a lot of issues. First, she lied to her boyfriend about my involvement in her life for no real reason. If he was okay with her having a son, he'd probably be okay with her having an ex-partner. Then she physically attacked me. Even apart from that, there was all the weird aggression with me and the way she seemed to hate me with a passion. There's a strong chance that she might try to turn our son against me in the future, and I can't risk it because he's still really young and impressionable. I still want to get custody because I honestly think he might be better off with me, but my ex-mother-in-law's words threw me off. Am I the asshole for wanting full custody of my son because my ex-wife attacked me in public over a petty fight we were having? Okay, so I decided to go through with a petition to get full custody. I weighed out the pros and cons, and honestly, none of it mattered in the end after I spoke to my son. I asked him point blank if he would rather live with me full-time than his mother, and he said that he wanted to live with me. When I asked him why, he told me that his mother wasn't around most of the time anyway, and he ended up spending most of his time with his nanny. He liked being with her, but he'd rather stay with me instead. Apparently, his mother would be out with her boyfriend most of the time, and she'd forbid our son from complaining to me about it, so he hadn't told me a word of it so far. Even when she'd be at home, she'd bring her boyfriend with her, and they'd spend most of their time together in the bedroom while he played by himself in the living room. That's what really set me off. So many things could have gone wrong, and I'm thankful that they didn't. Whenever his mother was at home with her boyfriend, he didn't even have his nanny looking after him and was completely on his own during that time, which was dangerous. He didn't say it, but I could tell that our son felt neglected whenever he was at his mother's place. That cemented my decision to get full custody. At the end of the day, what matters is whether our son is happy or not, and if he's happier with me, then he'll stay with me. It's as simple as that. Even if I kept my own conflicts with my ex-wife aside, there is no denying that she'd completely forgotten about her own son while chasing after her boyfriend, who apparently was so important that she couldn't spare even a second to look after our son. I shouldn't even have delayed the process, and I definitely should not have fallen for my ex-mother-in-law's manipulation. I bet this is her way of trying to make up for her daughter screwing up and giving me her location the other day. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have bothered herself with these things because she's a woman who's usually really detached from whatever goes on with her daughter and didn't even seem to care much when we got divorced. Anyhow, I don't really care what she thinks or what her daughter thinks because, to me, nothing is more important than my son's happiness and health. Clearly, that's not something my ex-wife cares about, so she can just go to hell. My son is still living with me, and his mom has had the good sense not to question it so far. But after she came to know that I'd filed for full custody, she came right over to my house and demanded an explanation, as if this was a new development and I hadn't already told her about it. I refused to let her in and instead threatened her with the cops, so she chose to go another way and stood right outside my yard to try and talk to me. I told her several times that there was no point, the petition had been filed, and I wasn't going to take it back. But she was on her knees, begging me to fix this and promising that she would get better somehow. It felt like crap to see her acting so desperate, but my hands were tied. My son was more important to me than her desperation. This went on for a while, but ultimately, she left, sobbing like a child, and I was relieved to see her go because I don't think I could have handled any more of that emotionally. She told me that her relationship was now over and that she'd be able to devote all her time to being a mother, so our son had nothing to worry about. But it didn't matter, it was too late. Our son had been feeling neglected for weeks now, and she'd made him feel scared enough to not tell me about it initially, but he cracked when I asked him about how he was treated by his mother. The realization hit me hard. My son had become so adept at hiding his true feelings that I genuinely thought he was thrilled to visit his mother's house. His cheerful demeanor always convinced me he was happy there, just as he used to be. Looking back, I wish I'd probed deeper sooner, but I was lulled into believing everything was fine. It wasn't until recently that the truth unraveled, and I'm only now grasping the depth of it. My ex-wife's erratic outburst today was a glaring confirmation that I'm making the right choice. Her behavior was so unhinged that even I, an adult, felt rattled witnessing it. I can't imagine the emotional toll it would take on our 6-year-old son. Thankfully, he was napping during her meltdown, spared from the chaos. I'm immensely relieved he didn't have to see or hear it, as explaining that to him would have been an even heavier burden. Tomorrow, my ex-wife and I are due for court-mandated mediation, a final attempt to resolve things before this custody battle escalates to court. Despite the necessity of this step, my nerves are frayed. Since the incident, my son has been staying with me, and he's made it clear he misses his mom but not enough to return to her. I've asked him repeatedly, gently, who he wants to live with, and each time he insists on staying with me. His certainty eases my heart. Forcing him to go against his wishes would have made me feel like a selfish monster, compounding the guilt I'm already wrestling with. Knowing he feels safe with me strengthens my resolve, but it doesn't erase the emotional weight of this ordeal. This situation has been grueling, to say the least. The image of my ex-wife's frenzied behavior during our last encounter is seared into my mind. Her friends have reached out multiple times, pleading her case, saying she's devastated and urging me to drop the custody modification. Their words tug at my conscience, but I can't back down. I know the neglect my son endured under her care, her inconsistent attention, her volatile moods. She may be heartbroken, but I refuse to let her guilt trip me into kindizing a toxic environment for our child. My responsibility is to him, not to her feelings, and I won't compromise his well-being to appease her. My lawyer has been a steady voice of reassurance, confident that our case is solid. We have evidence, footage from the restaurant where she lashed out at me, a spiteful note she left on her door to provoke me, and security recordings from my home showing her aggressive behavior during drop-offs. She'd shove our son's belongings at me with such force it sometimes threw me off balance, and worse, she'd push him toward me like he was an inconvenience. This wasn't a one-off, her volatility has been a pattern. Even during our marriage, her temper would flare into something almost unrecognizable, screaming, erratic, like she was unraveling. It was terrifying then, and it's unbearable to think of our son enduring that now. The joint custody arrangement was a misstep from the start, born of my naive hope that she'd stabilize for his sake. I see now how wrong I was, and I'm determined to protect him from that instability moving forward. The weight of this fight feels heavier with each passing day. I carry the guilt of not acting sooner, of assuming my son's smiles meant he was okay. I replay moments in my head, times I should have noticed his guarded expressions or questioned his eagerness to please. He's only 6, yet he's learned to mask his fear and discomfort to keep the peace. That breaks my heart. I'm also haunted by the memory of my ex-wife's outbursts, not just from the recent incident but from years of living with her unpredictability. Her friends paint her as the victim, but they didn't see the fear in our son's eyes when she'd lose control or the way he'd cling to me after drop-offs, reluctant to let go. Those moments fuel my determination. Mediation looms like a storm cloud. I want to believe it could lead to a resolution, but my ex-wife's refusal to acknowledge her behavior makes me doubt it. My son's words echo in my mind, he wants to stay with me. That's my anchor. I've failed him before by not seeing the truth sooner, but I won't fail him now. The evidence we've gathered paints a clear picture of her instability, and I trust it will speak for itself. Still, the thought of facing her tomorrow knots my stomach, not out of fear for myself, but for the future I'm fighting for. My son deserves a home where he feels safe, loved, and free to be himself, not one where he has to hide his feelings to survive. This battle is for him, and no amount of guilt or pressure will sway me from that. Hey, I got full custody. My ex-wife still has visitation rights, but they have to be fully supervised, so that's okay with me. My son is happy, and I'm probably the happiest I've ever been. These last few weeks were extremely emotionally draining for me, and I'm looking forward to nothing more than just unwinding at home for a few days, working from home, and spending some time with my son. My parents are also coming over to be with us and help me out with the chores because I've been really busy for the last couple of weeks and have kind of fallen behind. My mother had been helping me out anyway, but now they're going to be living with us for a few days